want to welcome all of you to this great event. I first want to give a big thank you to Carol Chaddock for getting us this great speaker, Elizabeth, and Gowan Batiste. She got them organized about 6 months ago or so, I think. And it's just blossomed and expanded since then, and it's all talking with all of you experts, farmers and gardeners and foresters, and it's become very exciting. Before we get started, I want to ask if you represent a farm or a garden or a forest or something. Please stand up. Can you stand up? Look at all of you. Thank you so much, and we've tried to get everybody who does represent a farm or a garden to write that on their name tag so that all of us can seek you out afterwards when we're going to have some time to network a little bit. I want to tell you that in the back of the room there are some free handouts. There are some magazines. There are some free seeds from Matt here in front row. Anything else that you put back there besides the free seeds? Newsletters and such. So you're welcome to any of those free handouts. Let me just tell you just a quick blurb about Elizabeth. Elizabeth consults, advises, and educates on soil health for carbon drawdown and water abundance to reduce the risks of climate change. Elizabeth has an education and background in environmental chemistry with a master's in soil science. And Elizabeth is an experienced program and project manager in science, technology, and education services for companies and nonprofit organizations. Elizabeth comes to us from the San Jose area, so it's a little bit of a drive, but we've been very excited to have her here, and I'm going to turn this right over. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. It's great to be here. I've enjoyed getting out in the community. Okay, let me do all the clicky things. Can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Is that good? Okay. And everywhere around? Yes. Okay, super. Okay, so let me get all my technology here. I love that with healthy soils, we have the opportunity to restore climate stability by regenerating ecosystems. We know that too much carbon-based greenhouse gases have been going up into the atmosphere and the oceans, and there's a great effort underway to reduce those emissions. We already are experiencing living conditions that are influenced by climate change as those climate emissions continue to rise. So we also need to draw down that carbon from the atmosphere because there's already too much there. We need to draw down carbon and store it somewhere. Where? In solid materials, in trees, in plants, and in soils. And isn't this a beautiful way to do it? I'm also a flower person. So let's imagine, we all love California. So let's imagine for a moment. Think of a place in California that you love. And if you'd like, close your eyes and picture in your mind a place in California that you love. Just for a moment. Imagine if in the face of climate change, California can draw down enough carbon to moderate extreme weather of drought and floods, to be more beautiful, bountiful, and prosperous. Today I'm going to talk about how does soil health provide climate change solutions? How can soil health cool the heat island of cities? And I live in an urban area, so I don't let the urban people off the hook. We need to be part of these solutions. How how can soil health benefit our food systems, which of course we urban people depend on, many of you very much, and what can we do in our gardens, on farms, and throughout our state. And then I'll go through slides and we'll have a little interaction, and then we'll, if you'd like, please hold the questions to the end. So let's start with trees and plants. Where do trees and plants get the substance that makes up a tree or a plant? Where does the trunk, the branches, the leaves, where does that come from? Most people think it all comes up from the ground. But we know that through photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is taken out of the atmosphere, combined with energy, to make compounds like sugars and carbohydrates and other compounds that the trees and plants need. So those building materials come from the carbon that's in the atmosphere. And the sugars then, during the life of the tree or plant, they purposely give sugars and carbohydrates to the soil. Now, why would a tree or plant give away their building materials? When the sugars and carbohydrates go into the soil, the purpose is to cultivate the microbial community. So microbes are tiny critters that live in the soil, bacteria, fungi, and they use the sugars and carbohydrates, but they do something for the plants as well. Bacteria participate in the nutrient cycle for nitrogen. Fungi go out to clay minerals and bring back potassium, phosphorus, and other nutrients back to the plant. Because we all know that we can't live on sugars and carbohydrates alone, right? Even though sometimes we might think we'd like to. So the plant doesn't either. And our food comes from plants, so those nutrients coming up to the plant is really important. Well, this is the soil building process. The carbon coming out of the atmosphere through the trees and plants into the soil, and then those interactions with the microbial community. Just as we have a food web in the ocean, we have a soil food web. So smaller critters are eaten by bigger critters, are eaten by bigger critters. A healthy soil is full of life. But where does the carbon go, and how does soil store the carbon? Well, this is a diagram of an aggregate. The microbes, particularly fungi, make a carbon compound, glomalin, that is more stable and durable in the soil. But it's sticky, and it acts like a glue, gluing particles together to form aggregates. That carbon is more stable, so it stays in the soil a long time, if undisturbed. Aggregates then are made up of roots, fungi, all the microbes, sand, silt, and clay, all the things that you would find in the soil. But there's also, this is the structure in the soil. And so it has porosity, so there's air and water in there too. It's the structure in the soil. And where you have more aggregates, you store more carbon and more water because of that porosity. This is a picture of an actual aggregate, and notice there's an earthworm. Always a good sign. If you have earthworms, then it's a healthier soil. So we want to see those little guys. This is how nature does it. And it may move very slowly naturally, but we've learned, particularly in recent years, there's a lot coming together in our understanding of the soil and the microbial community. We've learned to speed that up so that we can benefit from it in many ways. So what can the addition of organic matter tell us? Well, a simple measure of organic matter, such as, say you have an increase of 1% organic matter. That is gives us about 60% of that is carbon. So if we can look at how much organic matter is building up in the soil, 1% or 60% of that will be carbon. For water, with an increase of just 1% organic matter, there's a gain of 17,000 to 25,000 gallons of water per acre. And that's additional water in the system. So what do aggregates do for the landscape? Well, On this side, it's a darker color to indicate more carbon. There's air, there's waters, there's porosity. The surface is covered with plants, so they're moving that carbon from the atmosphere down in. The movement of carbon is into here. And this improves the water infiltration. Healthy soils have better water infiltration and water holding capacity. That it begins to act like a sponge. So instead of thinking of soil, healthy soil just on the top, it can really get quite deep. And that soil sponge then can store much more water. On the right side, we all know that when it rains or water comes down, hits a hard surface, it runs off, right? Well, a degraded soil behaves in a similar way, and this actually creates droughts and floods. So we know in California how that works, right? Healthy soils weather the storms. This is a picture from August of 2018 in Oklahoma, where there was a quick rain of 3 inches in a very short amount of time. And if you look down, the middle here is a road, and on the left side of the road is good plant coverage, and there's no flooding. And on the right side of the road, there's flooding. So that field is going to be much harder to work, and that crop is much more at risk. On the left is a healthier soil, so there's better infiltration into that. What's important is, with healthy soils, is the ability, not how much rain comes, but how well we can infiltrate the water into the soil and be held in that sponge. And that's something we can improve a lot in California. Small water cycles. Well, most of us think of large water cycles. There's the ocean, and then water evaporates, comes up, becomes clouds, and rains out over the mountains, runs down through streams and rivers back to the ocean. That's what most of us learned in grade school. But there's also small water cycles. A forest will, through evapotranspiration, cycle that water through the forest and keep using it. So it's a more effective rainfall. So it keeps doing that. Agricultural land, it really depends on the land management practices. So there could be a net gain or a net loss of water. And in urban areas, because we have so many buildings and hardscape, roads, that kind of infrastructure, there tends to be more heat, and urban areas actually push the rain away. And we know that it can go up pretty high in the atmosphere now, which is a whole other problem. But in urban areas, we still have a patchwork of open land. It's in every business has landscaping, houses have yards, parks have land, schools have land. And so if you add all of that up, it's cumulative. And so we could still have the benefits of healthy soils in urban areas as well. And what this means is that everyone, wherever you live, can do this. Heat transfer and heat absorption. On the left is an infrared picture, just looking down at the ground and taking a picture. So the blue and the green are cooler temperatures. So we know through evapotranspiration, plants are cooler, right? So this shows that. And then the red is a bare surface of soil, much warmer. Higher temperatures where there's bare soil. And this on here is about a 4°C difference.
And that's from that picture.
Yes, so the picture on the right, and if you notice, the plants are some dandelions and some grasses, so something you might find anywhere. And then in the corner is bare soil. Yes, thank you. So how does land become degraded? Most farming destroys the soil building system and causes a loss of carbon. So let's look at some examples and comparisons. On the left side is a tilled field. And if you drive around California, you see a lot of tilled fields. That's the way people have been doing it for a long time. It's all very neat and tidy, and that's our cultural value. to have everything nice and neat and tidy. But in this case, when the till or a plow goes across a field, it's physically breaking down the structure of the soil. So those aggregates are being broken up, and the carbon dioxide is being released, and the water follows the carbon, and you lose water as well. So that's a degrading system. On the right is a no-till. No-till, can be done lots of different ways. There's also reduced till, but no-till, they cut the crop, the plant material, and left the plant debris on the field so that the soil is covered. And then they plant the seeds of the next crop right into that, and the plants come up as you see here. So you have the soil building processes going with the new plants, but the soil is protected, covered. And so in this case, the carbon is going down and being given into the soil, and so is the water. Here on the left is bare soil. So a lot of times between crops, fields will be left bare. When it's bare, the temperature increases, and there's a loss of carbon dioxide and water. So you're losing carbon from this system. It's a degrading system. On the right are cover crops. And cover crops are often used in between those marketable crops to keep the field covered and to keep that soil building process going so the nutrient cycling is improved. But cover crops can also be planted alongside with a crop. It might be that some of the plants are used for soil benefits of nitrogen cycling or for breaking up compacted layers. There are lots of different plants that can give lots of different soil benefits. And cover crops are often best used when there's mixtures. But again, the soil is covered, there's plants growing in that field, and that brings the carbon down and brings the water down. Overgrazing and undergrazing on the left. We all know what that looks like. In that case, again, you're losing carbon and losing water. On the right is managed grazing. And there are many different methods of managed grazing. I won't go into all of that, but just the context here is having animals on the land. So for grazing, the grazers will chew the tops of plants, and that stimulates the growth of the plant and the growth of roots. So you're continually having living roots in the soil and an active plant. Now that's what your purpose is. Also, the animals will trample and beat the plant material into the surface. And of course, the urine and the manure are adding nutrients and microbes. So we need those microbes. This is often looked at as ways to help restore degraded systems because of bringing those microbes back into the system. There are all kinds of animals that are used for this. If you think about nature, nature has done this for a long time. We have elk, caribou, bison. You look around the world and there are herding animals that have lived this way and had healthy ecosystems. But in agriculture, it might be cows, but it could be chickens or pigs or sheep. Quite a variety of different animals can be used in this way. One of the key things is that a herd in nature, they don't just stay in one place and they don't scatter. They tend to herd, they stick together, and they move around because they have predators on them all the time. So they don't stay in one place for a very long time. And so nature is mimicked with these approaches. Animals are kept together, and then the farmer, rancher, land manager will look and see what is the condition of the plants and what timing is good to move them to the next area. And so they'll be moved from one area to another area to another area in improving that landscape. I think there might have been something else there. I don't know. So the question is, do we want to have increased or reduced organic matter, plant biodiversity, and soil microbiology? And on the left here is the healthy soil. Otherwise, you have dust. And again, there are plenty of places that you can go today, and there's a lot of dust, and it's causing lots of problems. So how can degraded soil be regenerated? Well, we have the soil health principles, and you'll also hear them called conservation principles, among other things. And sometimes the list grows or shrinks, but this is the basic list. Always keep soil covered, which we've talked about, and you saw some examples there, with compost, mulch, and plants. Limit your soil disturbance. We want to keep the soil structure, those aggregates intact, with reduced till or no-till. Encourage biodiversity of plants and animals. Maintain those living roots in the soil. I mean, if you see weeds, now, you know, whenever I see weeds along the edges of roads and stuff, now some of them may be invasive or whatever, but that weed is still doing work in that soil. They may be there because they have a long taproot that can get in there and break it up. So we want to maintain living roots year-round, and that's where the cover crops come in too. And then integrate animals. Because converting to regenerative agriculture and land management can restore ecosystems and store more carbon. Regenerative just means that whatever land management practice you're using, the land is healthier as you go along and not degrading. So we want to regenerate, use our land management practices to regenerate that soil and keep improving the soil health so that you can do more with it. Other terms that you'll hear people talking about, you're probably a lot of people in this room are familiar with this, is carbon farming. Carbon farming is the idea that manage the land so there's a net gain of carbon in the soil, drawing down that carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the soil. That's what we want to do. There's an online tool called Comet Planner that helps people put in their acreage and what soil health practices they're doing, and then it quantifies and calculates for you the amount of greenhouse gases displaced. A great resource there is Marin Carbon Project, and then Carbon Farm Plan. Every farmer plans what they want to do with their farm, right? So maybe you need to do something over here and do something different over there and do something different over there. But you want to think about and plan where are you going with this? What areas what purpose are you using certain areas of your land? What uses do you have? And then what would be appropriate for that? And so this online tool, Comet Farm, helps people do that. Lay out a plan and then work that plan. And a great resource there is the Carbon Cycle Institute. Benefits for farmers, gardeners, and ecosystems. So all of us, whether it's in our home garden, our yard, out on a farm, the ecosystem can benefit. Let's just go through these. Higher nutrient availability and cycling, increased rain infiltration and water holding capacity of better soil sponge, reduced flooding, increased resilience to droughts, reduced or no irrigation needed. Again, there's enough water now that can be stored in your soil sponge that you may get through a season without needing to draw from managed resources, purchase irrigation water. Reduced or no inputs. So inputs are fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides, and they're a cost. So when you can reduce your cost, then you can improve what you're doing. And that leads to higher quality and productivity yields, as well as higher profitability. So what does this mean for our food system? I live in an urban area. I depend on our farmers to be successful, to do well, and provide us food so that we can enjoy the abundance here. Well, let's start at the top. We grow the food in gardens, farms, and ranches. And that relates to our ecosystem health, our soil health, our ecosystem health. Then we certify that food so that we can communicate what the quality is. And that, of course, we have the organic standards, been around for a long time. Basically, no pesticides or herbicides, among other things. Well established and has done well. Non-GMO, not genetically modified organisms, not genetically engineered, and now also not bioengineered. So we like to have those labels or some indication of what that is so that we can make our own choices for ourselves. ROC is a new label that's still in early stages, but it's coming along. It's regenerative organic certification. So it's taking the organic certification to the next level using regenerative agriculture, keeping in mind soil health and carbon drawdown and water infiltration and all those things we've been talking about. It's being brought to us by the Rodell Institute, and they focus on soil health, animal welfare, and social fairness. And then the other one coming is EOV, Ecological Outcome Verified. Again, we're talking about the ecosystem. This is from the Savory Institute, and it deals with the meat supply chain. So when I go and purchase something, well, I'm vegetarian, so, but when I go purchase for my family, then I know all the way back to the ecosystem that how those animals are being raised are improving the health of the ecosystem. So those are some certifications, some well-established and some newer ones. But then the food goes to farmers markets and grocery stores where we purchase it, where I purchase it, because I'm not a farmer. But all of these things help me understand what it is I'm buying. And then we eat food, of course, at homes and restaurants. And restaurants are picking up on this. Just as we can go to restaurants and get organic food, there are restaurants that are thinking all the way back to the ecosystem and regenerative. So, yay. And that relates to our human health. And we all want to be healthy, and our families and loved ones to be healthy. So it all comes back to our food and our environments. From that, there's food waste. We know probably too much food waste, but we can do home composting or city collection that's composted and made available then as compost to go back and build that soil and help with that soil to grow the food. So I know this is a really simplistic circle, but every one of these can be improved. And every one of these areas has the opportunities, in particular for rural communities, for economic development and for better livelihoods. And as all of these strengthen, then those of us, which everyone eating food, is going to be a lot better off. So I think there's still a lot of potential in there. Well, I like to put this one in here just so I can, standing on the edge of the end of this row, I can still smell those peaches. We've talked about soil health, what is the soil building process, how carbon comes down with photosynthesis and is purposely given into the soil to cultivate the soil microbiology and that exchange of nutrients there, nutrient cycling. And then we've seen what it looks like on landscapes and how it can influence the temperatures, surface temperatures of soil in our environments, and a little bit on the food system and how that's set in. So next, let's talk about what can we do. Well, at the Paris Climate Conference in 2015, one country showed up with a commitment to improve soil health, and that was France. But with that, everyone else in the world kind of said, what? Well, you're talking about soils and carbon storage, carbon sequestration. What is this about? And it's broke open a conversation that I know it's continuing to grow because of what it has to offer. But the basic timeline that came out of this last summit was, so we know that the carbon emissions are continuing to go up, and the idea is that by 2020, let's have a turning point and have them start to come down. And then hit targets of sustainable development goals, and everybody everywhere has all their own different goals and milestones. And then by 2050, the goal is to have net zero emissions. But you can't have net zero emissions of carbon going up into the atmosphere until you can also draw it down. But what this sets is goals and timelines, which always help us to rally around. The priorities then are here. And of these priorities, the first three, energy, infrastructure, and transportation, are usually what towns, cities, and are most concerned with. On the other end, finance is its own world, and industry is its own world. But notice number 4, land use. Large-scale deforestation is replaced with large-scale land restoration, and agriculture shifts to earth-friendly practices. Woohoo! I was so happy to see that we are in the top priorities. And I did go to a variety of sessions at this event, and I met people from around the world who were here for this event, and people that I admire and respect. And what I was hearing from them was that they are looking at California. California is who they are looking for to lead in this area for land use. And there's some good reasons why. But one of the things people told me, and I was surprised and a bit challenged by that, but one of the things people told me is because they know that California will figure it out and take action and get results. We will get things done. And I thought that was very encouraging, but also challenging. And of course we know that, right? We all know that. That's part of our culture. That's part of how we do things. We are that way. So some organizations with international reach, the 4 per 1,000 from France, many countries have taken their lead, and 4 per 1,000, it relates to the amount of carbon you're putting into the soil. So France is great, but even then, we have a good relationship with California for them, so that's great. And then Regeneration International networks projects all around the world, so they're really good to look for good examples of what people are doing in the world. Savory Institute, they are already international, and they have a goal of 100 hubs. And I think they're up to about 40 hubs now. And these are for outreach, education, and technical assistance. And Biomimicry Institute, we're talking about learning from nature. This is what they're all about. And they cover a broad spectrum of things. But the area that I particularly like is that urban-rural interface. How do we keep our rural areas thriving and healthy in many respects, even though we have a lot of urban growth? And permaculture is of course, permaculture is not any one group. It's distributed, it's dispersed, but there are many people working from this point of view and doing wonderful things. So there's a lot to contribute. And the ecosystem restoration camps comes out of the Netherlands, and they go and set up a temporary camp in a country, like Spain is their first, and now there are other places growing, where they set up a temporary camp, and people come, and there's education and opportunities to work the land and see a degraded landscape become restored. And that's very encouraging. I find all of these to be very hopeful and encouraging. So on the planet, where is carbon stored?
Trees and soil.
Yeah.
Seaweed too,
Yes.
in the oceans as well.
And the oceans.
In
So
the oceans, yeah.
what we have been doing for some time, because it's our energy, and it's worked for us in many ways, is we've taken fossil fuels out of the ground and burned them and used them to generate energy, but that's put a lot of carbon up into the atmosphere. We can't put it back in the ground directly as fossil fuels. It's changed. And it's going to the atmosphere, and then the oceans absorb from the atmosphere. And no equilibrium there. But on the other side, in the soil and biota is just all the plants and animals. So on the soil and the biota, we have been losing carbon for a long time. We've just accelerated it in recent decades, in the last 100 years. But there is a lot of carbon that has been lost due to agriculture and due to human development. The difference is that this carbon can be replenished. And nature may move very slowly, but we've learned how we can speed that up with our better understanding of healthy soils. So to restore carbon to the soil with soil health, the potential is equivalent to what has been lost. An estimated soil carbon globally has been depleted over 50%. Restoring degraded grasslands, for example, grasslands are 40% of the surface of the planet, could lower greenhouse gas emissions to pre-industrial levels within decades. I find that a very hopeful solution. The main person to read and look and research, if you're interested in the global numbers around carbon, is a soil scientist, Dr. Ratan Lal at Ohio State University. Oh, sorry, did you want the last one? Okay. Most people have seen this book by now, Drawdown. They presented 100 solutions to kind of get people thinking about more positive approaches to things, and doing the research and evaluating what are solutions and how do they size up. Well, regenerative agriculture is number 11, and it's expected for this to grow 10 times by 2050. And that will have quite an impact on carbon storage, carbon sequestration. Paul Hawkins, the editor of this book, recently said that his biggest surprise was in the food sector. They didn't expect the food sector to have such potential opportunities. But it's because soil health is the foundation to food and land use sectors. And apparently there's another edition where that's going to get a little more attention. So what can we do in California? Well, this is a farm. It's an organic farm that's been around for quite some time. It's a beautiful place. I love it. They've been very successful. But can anyone here, after what we've been talking about with soil health and landscapes and things, look at this picture and tell me what you see? Bare soil. Bare soil. So it's all neat and tidy, which we all like, but it's bare soil. And in the back here, there's also tilled. So this is a degrading soil. Okay, it's still producing, it's still doing well. It's a degrading soil. Hopefully that will transition. Well, efforts in California really began, or a big part of it is the California Climate Smart Agriculture programs. In particular, the Healthy Soils program. Organic and conventional farms are beginning to shift to regenerative, and they're seeing lots of incentives to do that. Research and education, we have at UC Berkeley, UC Davis, CSU at Chico. There is now a Regenerative Agriculture Institute at Chico, and that was founded by farmers. Ecosystem restoration camps has come to California. It's actually forming, so if anyone's interested in this, let me know, and I'll connect you with those folks. But there are, as they've been talking about getting together and how they're going to organize and form, the campfire happened in Paradise. And so as they thought, well, in the future we'll have a camp or multiple camps around California, they now already have their first camp in Paradise. Yay. So there was a local person in Chico who's taking the lead, and there is a lot of good things happening. Because it isn't, a lot of times when there's a disaster, people have to focus on the infrastructure to get back, to get everything working again, to get houses and get people well situated. But the ecosystem needs attention too, and especially when you have a fire, because there's a lot of toxins that you don't want to go down that Butte Creek. So that's happening, and then expanding soil health to urban areas. I know, this is a more rural area here, but I think there's a lot of potential, and like I said, I'm not letting the urban areas off the hook. Not only do we depend on our farmers all over the state, but there's something we can do. And I think that as there's a better awareness and understanding about healthy soils, whether it's in school programs that have gardens or parks or neighborhoods, that there's going to be a better appreciation and more support, better appreciation for what farmers are doing for us, and more support willing to go back and forth. So I think there's a lot of bridge building we can do there, urban and rural. And this is one program that's helping to do that. So the CDFA, California Department of Food and Agriculture, has a climate smart agriculture programs. There's actually 4 of them. Healthy Soils program is one of them. And there's 2 parts. The incentive program grants are about providing funds, grants to farmers to implement healthy soils practices. But it's the farmer that decides what they need to do. There's a list of 25, I think it's about 25 these days, 25 practices. It's like a menu. And then as someone working their land is deciding what's appropriate where, they can pull from those practices and then come up with a plan and apply for these grants. Now, the application period is open, and Healthy Soils Program applications are due by March 8th. So if anybody's thinking about that, keep that in mind. One of the reasons for this kind of program is because, and you farmers in here may recognize this, is so the farmer or rancher, in making changes to how they do things, this is their livelihood. This is their business. This is how they bring in the crops and take care of their families. So it's really important that some of that risk is shared. If they're willing and see the advantages, the benefits of transitioning to more regenerative agriculture practices, then there may be risks involved and there may be capital investments. So there is a transition period of a few years depending on the situation. So that's the reason behind setting up the incentive program grants, is to help move through that transition so they can continue and have successful livelihoods. The demonstration program grants are about sharing what people are learning with each other. So hopefully tonight, as we break, there's more conversations that will happen. And I know a lot of you know each other, and there's a lot going on in this community, but there may be ways that we can still help each other. And one of them is to learn from each other. So demonstration program is about providing grants for workshops to be done in the field on a farm. So farmers can talk with each other, see what's working and why, and see, maybe it can work for them. So both these programs, I think, will scale throughout California in a big way that will really help California. And of course, several states are watching us too, but the whole world is watching, right? And a wonderful organization, CalCan, California Climate and Agriculture Network, online. They have, they support these efforts, really doing a great job, and a great resource. Healthy Soils Program, the first year was funded. It was actually Governor Brown proposed the program to help with climate, the climate smart agriculture. Say with the first year, 25,000 cars were taken off the road. Everybody likes to see those comparisons. I don't know why. But Healthy Soils Program, the second year went to zero. Didn't get funding. Now, have you ever noticed that soil gets taken for granted? Yeah, so a lot of people simply don't know why soil health is important. And that's one of the reasons why reasons why I give these talks. And so there are a lot of other programs that are a lot more glamorous, that get a lot more funding, and we want to shift that and get more attention and more understanding so more people understand what this is and its importance. The third year, this year, we have 14 million, although I've seen 15 million too, so something like that. So how is Healthy Soils program funded? Well, the cap and trade program generates funds, and then the legislature decides how to spend that. They manage the budget. The program itself is managed by CARB, California Air Resources Board, and soil health is part of the natural and working lands. So, and there is a natural and working lands implementation plan that is being worked on and developed, and I believe there is a new draft out. So if you go online, you can find that new draft and how that fits in. Proposition 68 was passed last June. Thank you for voting for that. And that provided half of the funds for soil health. And then AB 2377 provided technical assistance to help farmers address all that. So funding is important. And what I have found in talking with representatives is, now you're up here, I think understands a little bit more, but most representatives don't know what soil health is or why it's important and how it relates to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. So please, when you talk with if you support this, when you talk with your representatives, don't assume they know what it means. Please help them understand that. Okay, so what can we do in cities? Well, apply soil health principles to land in private, commercial, and public spaces. As we've been talking about, there are lots of areas, even in small communities. I've lived in small towns a lot, so there's still a lot you can do, and walking around you can see. Yeah. Well, the one thing that's happening is Green America is leading an effort called Climate Victory Gardens. So you can go to their website. They have a lot of good information, great little videos, and good resource, and a map. So they're encouraging people to plant a garden. And most of us probably know that during World War II, there were victory gardens planted by families all over the country, in their yards, in their communities. And those victory gardens fed 40% of this country. So the idea now is to do it for climate victory. And so great resource there. Urban green infrastructure. There are already a lot of programs that towns, cities need to address. Stormwater management, weed suppression. A lot of soil health principles and practices can be integrated into what's already going on in towns and cities. Swales, rain gardens. There's a lot, I think, that can be integrated into what's already happening. So we don't have to tell them, do something completely different. Just think about how you're doing it. What are the land management practices in that area, and how can it be improved? And I also wanted to mention, not just cities, but counties are looking at this. So Marin County has a county-wide carbon farming plan. I'm in Santa Clara County. They're looking at the Healthy Soils Initiative and seeing how that can be expanded, because there's different requirements and stuff to more farmers. So every county can look at this as a whole, and how do they support their local agriculture, and hopefully with healthy soils. Soil health demonstration sites, there's a whole spectrum of what these might look like. There was a wonderful little video I saw of a food forest in a European city, or town, township, and all along the sidewalk as you walk through town, every little planting area had something growing in it that was food. And then in the planting strips, they had something growing. So, and then they had little signs to educate people. So we could have that in our towns and cities where it's more public, more accessible. People could be able to just walk along and learn something about where their food comes from. So I like that. But so it could be here at the Mendocino Botanical Gardens, right? There's vegetables being grown there. There's all kinds of beautiful things there. Or it could be somewhere, who knows? You could have a half a dozen sites here. So demonstration sites can be many things, from something small that everybody walks by every day to something big on a farm that really every farmer wants to see what's happening. So, but the key things are to feature soil health principles and practices in action to draw down carbon and store it in the soil, and create opportunities to increase the awareness and education to make soil health and the related benefits common knowledge, because that's what we want this to happen, is this to become common knowledge. How can we work together? When I thought about this, and this is just a simple wheel, but I talk with people in all of these different interests and perspectives. So we have gardeners, farmers, ranchers. In California, we have vineyards. That's a big part of agriculture. Residents in whatever communities you're in, organizations, institutes. Of course, the city, the county, the state, you've seen what's happening in some of those areas. And then CalCan, they're terrific. NRCS is Natural Resource Conservation Service. They grew out of the original Soil Conservation Service that came from the Dust Bowl times. Well, now they have I think they have a bigger role to play today. And they're at the federal level. They're the ones that established a lot of the research and stuff on the practices that are being used. And then RCDs, Resource Conservation Districts. Anyone in here from RCD? Oh, I invited them, but they didn't make it. Okay. So RCDs, they have different roles, but they're very much about helping farmers to implement what it is they want to accomplish. So great resources. And then people out talking about it. So then the question here in this room today is, how can we work together? Are there things in this county, in this region, that we can do given our different interests and perspectives? So I've talked about a lot of different things. Soil health, building processes, the landscapes, what's been going on, different programs, international, state, local. Tell me something that from all of that you can think of that you can do. Anyone? Matt.
One thing that I find is not often talked about, but it seems so fundamental, is to consume less.
Consume
I
less.
see a lot of the solutions that are brought up as being ways to really protect our modern form of consumption. Becoming a producer versus a consumer is a big step towards localization, towards drawdown, towards less carbon. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can see that in a lot of respects. Yes.
Elizabeth, could you
Yes, another one?
repeat the questions?
Or give him
Yeah.
the money.
What can we
Or,
do?
or you
Oh, I'm
can't
sorry.
really hand the mic, it's
Okay.
a lavalier mic. It's pretty
Okay,
difficult.
so Matt's talking about consuming less. And I cut it in my mind, I don't know if I can rephrase it. So consuming less. Why don't I let you do that, speak for yourself.
Maybe you can stand up and talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So I just brought up that a lot of the solutions I've seen that have to do with climate change are largely geared towards protecting our modern consumer lifestyles here. Even the ones that are presented internationally seem to be put a wall up, keep the people down there, keep access to their resources flowing towards our consumer societies and so forth. So what I'm getting to is if we become
less consumers.
Less consumers.
If we can consume less, we take our weight off the planet. If we can microscale our impact on the larger organism, then we're not needing as much.
And Matt, can you just say who you represent?
I'm Matt. I work at the Stanford Inn at Victory Gardens for Peace and Ecology Action.
Victory Gardens for Peace and Ecology Action over at the Stanford Inn.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Matt.
great. Anyone else? Yes. Could you stand up, please?
Yeah, well,
I ironically just got a letter from Ross Gelbspan. I don't know if a lot of you remember him. He's a friend of mine.
Not so close.
Ross Gelbspan wrote Heat Is On. He was a Boston Globe journalist who won many awards for breaking open the fossil fuel industry using junk science.
Okay,
And
can you stick
in
with
his-
the topics?
Yeah, in his letter, he talked about,
What is your question? Or what is the thing that you can do? What is the question is, what is the thing that you can do or willing to do?
I'm leading up to it.
Okay.
And in his letter,
Like to hear it.
okay, if somebody else, I could give it up. I mean, what he was saying was, this was a public issue years ago, and it's been considered, and activists and environmentalists and people were put down for talking about consumption, for saving our soil. I think we need to change the conversation about not calling ourselves activists or environmentalists. This is a public health issue for the planet. And I brought his words up because people may not like my words, but I respect his words as well with mine.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have anything that they would go out in the field and do for soil health?
One of the things that I'm doing is I'm concerned about wildfire in an urban interface, and so I'm, rather than burning all my slash and everything, I'm chipping it, which is keeping me strong. It's a lot of work, but I've been growing the soil on my property by chipping it, 4 to 6 inches, and putting it 4 to 6 inches deep and letting it, compost in place. It seems to be working pretty well.
That's great, thank you. So, yes, so thank you, that was chipping instead of burning it, and he's keeping it in place. So that's a great mulch, you're keeping your soil covered.
Hi, I'm Linda. I'm with the Redwood Coast Senior Center Kitchen Garden in Fort Bragg downtown. And one of the things that we're doing in the garden is really, really trying to restrain ourselves from weeding. And when we harvest a plant, when we harvest the whole thing, we don't pull it out. We cut it at the soil level and leave the roots in, and then we plant around it.
Great, thank you. So, cutting off the plant debris for weed and reducing weeding, so less disturbance in the soil.
I'm in a private home, and I'm just beginning to convert ornamentals to food, things that produce food. So one by one.
Great. So supporting that food cycle, caring about transitioning from ornamentals that may not fit in there to food that supports that food cycle system. Anyone else?
Remembering Arbor Day, we can plant more trees.
Yeah.
Plant more trees. Yes, definitely. Okay, one more. How about, do you have one?
Stop using your garbage disposal. Compost it.
Stop using the garbage disposal and compost it instead.
Right on.
Help bring those nutrients back to the soil. Okay, thank you.
And don't forget the children. You gotta raise up children.
So as you hear, and we'll continue this conversation, but as you hear, there are a lot of things that can be done, from one specific thing to bigger things. But another thing you can do is share your understanding of soil health principles. Talk with people. And how carbon is drawn down and stored in the soil to help stabilize our climate. Do something where you live, in your garden, your yard, the schools, business, or farm. And then please remember to educate your representatives. They need a little more help so that they can understand what it is we're talking about, and please, and then vote to support climate smart agriculture, in particular the Healthy Soils Program. And so I'm going to just summarize briefly here. We know how to draw down carbon and store it in the soil with soil health to stabilize the climate. That's the hopeful solution that can bring us all together and move in a positive way. We know improved soil health also offers important benefits, such as restoring water cycles, cooling the urban heat island, making food systems more resilient, and improving livelihoods. What's needed is the ability to scale very quickly. Everyone can do it. We have the California Healthy Soils Program that can help us scale statewide. And demonstration examples, I think, need to be in every community so that this can become common knowledge and not such an unusual thing to talk about soils. Because what we want is a balanced climate, fresh water, fertile soil, to continue to have a beautiful, bountiful, prosperous California. I have some resources here, and we've written some down if you want to check them. But my website is soilhealthwatch.org or soilcarbonwatch.org, and I have links to everywhere and lots of resources there. So all of these can be found there too. But great resources, of course, CalCan, California Climate and Agriculture Network, California Healthy Soils Initiative, and the NRCS. So next, I'm going to ask Gowan Batiste to come up. I can talk with you about a lot of things. I would never go onto a farm or ranch and tell a farmer what to do. But I hope that when I do get out and talk about soil health, then we can have a better understanding and support all of you folks out there. Gowan has the farm, Fortunate Farm, which I was fortunate to go to today, so thank you for hosting that. She's also on the advisory board for the Climate Smart Agriculture Program. Please welcome Gowan.
So in our community, we're really blessed with having a lot of different amazing approaches to doing the same good work. So there's a lot of people in this community who approach this from a lot of different angles. So I don't necessarily want to talk about our farm per se, because you can go to dozens of different places around the county and see amazing things happening. What I was asked to talk about is our farm is one of the first tranche of farms in Mendocino County history to write a carbon farm plan with Mendocino Resource Conservation District. So that was a 2-year process that's just concluded that is now starting a 20-year plan. So we're in the process now of second year of baseline tests. It's using a lot of the resources that were in this presentation actually, Comment Planner, which is looking at a lot of different variables and can basically spit out numbers like, well, if we were to tweak this, or this, or we were to add more hedgerows, or we were to convert land to grazing land, essentially like what's our drawdown potential given a lot of different variables. So it was a really interesting process to go through. We worked with one of the hubs of the Savory Institute that was mentioned, the Jefferson Center for Holistic Management. We're running several parallel studies as well. So we have a 5-year transect study with the Jefferson Center for Holistic Management, which is specifically looking at pasture health. We're producer members of Fibershed, which is another carbon regenerative land management nonprofit. So they come out and do soil sampling and testing. Our testing lab is the Gowden lab at UC Berkeley. So what that means practically on the farm level is that there's a whole bunch of scientists, politicians, both government and an NGO, nonprofits, who are just all over our farm all the time. So one of the co-authors of our plan was the NRCS, which is a federal program. So that's the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So one of the things that they did is then took our plan that they were a co-author of and turned it into a set of EQIP contracts. So now the individual projects in the carbon farm plan are being carried out with their supervision. So it was interesting as a farmer, as a farmer who my background is in conventional organic. It's interesting we're talking about conventional organic, but tillage-based organic farming is my educational background. That was my experience. It's been a huge learning curve, and it's still a learning curve, and we're in the first couple years of a 20-year process, so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens and to track over time. And hopefully our plan will continue to be funded, like you were saying in your presentation, that these are political issues. unfortunately. Climate change is a political issue. You know, the administration empowered at any given time determines whether or not these things get studied and whether government scientists get to spend their time and resources on this. Nonprofits are a little bit more flexible, which I think is part of why a lot of nonprofits and NGOs are being brought in on these projects, because they can continue doing their work, even if government scientists can't. Practically, what it means for us is that, you know, for me personally, I got to work with some brilliant scientists and get a lot of feedback, a lot of advice, a lot of plan writing. Carbon Cycle Institute, who was in your presentation, Jeff Creek, who's the head of that organization, he's a PhD soil scientist who was just in the New York Times, which is really cool. He's been out to our farm multiple times, he spent multiple days with us and was part of writing our plan. So what it meant for us was just to have access to this brain trust, and what I'm hoping will happen now in the county for the next couple of years going forward is an expansion of this program. I actually just got to speak with somebody from the UC last week. They've just hired a California Healthy Soils Initiative person for Mendocino County. So they'll be starting in the next couple of months, and then their job is going to be to go around to farms and educate people about these opportunities and help people go through this planning process. So for farmers and ranchers, a carbon farm plan, you know, I mean, it's a series of tools. It's not really even just one tool, and it's not a quick fix. There's not a lot of certainty in it. There's a lot of variables and possible outcomes. On a county level, I would personally really love to see Mendocino County have a carbon farm plan, at least to develop a set of goals. How I generally feel about it is it's kind of like, you know, when you're aiming in the right direction, wherever you land is going to be better than where you were coming from. And so on a larger municipal level, a county level, a state level, it's really gratifying to see that happening. And we've been able to have Jim Wood and Jared Huffman on our farm, and in some ways it's, you know, it's been a wild ride. But as for my peers, you know, there's an amazing farming community in Mendocino County. You know, we're very, very, very blessed with that. We have fantastic gardeners, we have very educated people, much more so than I am. And so for me to get to kind of come into this has been a huge privilege. And it's a work in progress. So I'm interested to see what happens at year 5 when we get our next set of data, and that's going to be really cool. For now, you know, we're looking at mostly baseline, but we do have some cool numbers. So yeah, it's interesting, and as it comes along, and it's interesting to invite a whole bunch of government and non-government scientists onto your farm and just let them go through all your stuff and look at what you're doing. And for a lot of us as farmers, that's not what we're used to at all, you know. But I found it to be a really, really rewarding process. And, you know, we're planting hedgerows. Who would have thought? I mean, that was a surprise to me that hedgerow planting actually has a measurable carbon sequestration increase, because windbreaks make plants make bigger, broader leaves, and bigger, broader leaves collect more solar energy and produce more root exudates. I mean, it makes sense when you say it, but it's one of those things for me that I had never connected those dots. So I definitely recommend anybody go to Combat Planner and play with it. How it actually works is totally beyond me. I cannot help you with that. But there's a lot of interesting tools out there, and especially the Marine Carbon Project is very generous with their data and their scientists. A lot of these things are very expensive to do. You know, our first round of soil sampling, it was about 12 solid hours of digging straight down 45 centimeters with a metal tool, and then shipping hundreds of pounds of dirt, like next day delivery, because it expires, so it has to get there right away, to a lab. It's not actually that easy to collate all of this data on private land. But organizations like the Marine Carbon Project that have access to millions of dollars and have access to endowments can do the same work, which you can apply to your own place, and then they can make that available to you. So there's a lot that you can access even if you can't do it all yourself. And we certainly aren't, but I really appreciate the chance to get to share about this because it's been a busy couple years, and it's just the beginning.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, so that's our presentation time. I have a little experiment over here that shows a demonstration about aggregation and water infiltration. It's just a real quick thing, but it's kind of fun to watch. I also have some handouts, and there are more handouts and seeds in the back. But Cindy would first like to have another
Yeah,
talk.
just
So,
for a second.
Please do.
Is there anybody else, Matt, did you want to say anything else about your involvement with the victory piece?
Sure. And anybody else that has a quick something or other they'd like to share?
Yeah, I'm part of a nonprofit Ecology Action, which is John Jevons' group in Willits, and anyone who's interested in gardening and how this can play a part of a transition to a sustainable future should look at Ecology Action and growbiointensive.org. John's got 45 years of research that he's been doing over there and a lot of great information. And all of our stuff's available for free on the internet, so you can download all our booklets and all that. Yeah, I'm Matt from Victory Gardens for Peace. That's John Jevons in Ecology Action, who I also work with. Growbiointensive.org is the website. And I'll be in the back later. There's some seeds back there that we're giving away, and I can talk more about all that stuff. Victory Gardens for Peace is an initiative that we're starting. We're trying to bring back the old Victory Gardens movement, and was really happy to see the Victory Gardens for Climate Change up there, which is a separate thing, but we're the same goal. And one of the cool things about what we do with Ecology Action is we figured out how to grow complete diets in a very small space using very few resources. So we have a diet design back there that I could share with you that's a good diet to eat that can grow a complete diet in less than 1% of the land area using less than 2% of the water. And it's built soil 3 times faster than a 9-farm no-till study showed. So there's all sorts of things possible, and we're experimenting with it over at the Stanford Inn. We invite you guys to come check us out. We do workshops and classes and tours, so I'll be back there to talk more about that if you guys are interested.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Hi again, I'm Linda, and I'm from the kitchen garden at the Redwood Coast Senior Center, right in downtown Fort Bragg, near Cotton Auditorium. And we have our garden in our front yard, so if you want to have some experience to grow food in your front yard and have healthy soil in your front yard, come to the Senior Kitchen Garden on Monday afternoons from 1 to 3. And we'll grow food for seniors, share the extras, and learn about composting and soil health all together.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Kellerman. I work at the Noyo Food Forest, and for those of you who don't know what the Noyo Food Forest is, we are a local nonprofit in Fort Bragg at the high school, and we grow food for all of the cafeterias in the school district. So every week we tell them what we have, they tell us what they want, we bring it to them, and then everything we don't sell to them at a discounted rate we sell at the farmer's market or to local restaurants in order to subsidize the food that we're giving to the schools. And I also run an internship program for the high school students. So we have high schoolers in the garden after school most of the year. In the summer, they're there all day, every day. And so we're teaching these kids how to grow their own food. A big part of what I think is the most important part is empowering 13, 14-year-olds to be able to look at a seed and understand that they themselves can plant it and turn it into food for them, for their families, for their communities. So that's if you're interested, we're there during the winter, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and in the rest of the year, we're there all week long. So you can come by, say hi, walk around the garden.
Okay, this experiment's going to be really cool. And then, please, you're welcome to some handouts and watch the experiment and network, talk to each other.
The handouts that I have here, one's on the Healthy Soils Program, one's from the Soils Committee from the Sierra Club. It's building healthy soils. It's called the Dirty Dozen, so things that anyone can do in their yard. And then one on the conservation principles. So if you'd like to see the little demo, please come on over. And so what happens, let's watch and see what happens. What's happening is the water hits that type of soil. It's running off. And in the water that runs off, there's an erosion problem. It's taking many of those particles along with it. So then that gets into the streams and rivers, causes problems for fish and all kinds of things. And if you ever have problems with algae blooms in the ocean, it's the nutrients coming off the agricultural landscape and eroding away and coming out in the water. So there's yeast, and that yeast as a microbe acts on the flour and creates porosity in the bread. So what happens when we have it rain on top of bread? Is it running off? Is it causing erosion? No. It's infiltrating and being soaked into that bread. Think about the soil that we want to have as more like a sponge. When it rains then on that sponge, a bigger piece, right? What's happening when that water comes down? Is it running off? Is it causing erosion? No, it's